I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, honestly. Emily and I had always been the solid couple, you know. We met in college, got married pretty young, and for the most part I thought we had a decent, normal life. She was the kind of girl everyone called beautiful but bitchy, but I loved her anyway. She had that sharp tongue, that quick wit, and she could be kind when she wanted to be. We had our ups and downs, but nothing that seemed out of the ordinary. Looking back, maybe I should have paid more attention to the little signs. She'd suddenly get defensive if I asked about her phone, or she'd be weirdly secretive when I mentioned going out with friends. Small stuff, really. I figured everyone has their secrets. She started working more overtime at her job too, which I didn't think much of at first. It was just a phase, or so I told myself. I trusted her. Hell, I wanted to trust her. But deep down, something didn't sit right anymore. Then, things got weird when I started noticing her changing her routines. She'd leave the house early, come back late, and she'd be oddly exhausted. Sometimes she'd be short with me, snapping over nothing, and I'd catch her lying about where she was or who she was with. She'd call me paranoid or crazy if I dared to ask questions, so I kept quiet. I figured I was just overthinking it, maybe insecure after everything we'd been through. But the biggest red flag, her phone. She started keeping it glued to her hand. She'd hide it when I entered the room, and she'd delete messages fast. Honestly, I was starting to feel like I was dating a stranger. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously off. Then one night, I saw her phone light up with a message from someone named Chris. Just that name, no emoji, no nothing. She responded quickly, almost like she was expecting it. I saw her typing, then suddenly she turned her screen away. My stomach sank. That was the first time I really felt my gut twist in a bad way. I knew somehow that this wasn't just about work stress or late nights anymore. Something bigger was going on. I didn't say anything right away. I wanted to catch her. In the act, see if I could get real proof. But honestly, I was scared to confront her. I was angry, confused, and hurt all at once. I kept a close eye, holding my breath every time she left her phone unattended. Then one day I stumbled on something that changed everything. Images, paparazzi photos. Something I never expected to see: Emily with a guy I didn't recognize in a hotel lobby. They looked cozy, too cozy. They were holding hands, leaning into each other like they were the only two people in the world. It was like a punch to the chest. I stared at the screen in disbelief, feeling my world crumble. How long had this been going on? How many times had I missed the signs? I kept asking myself how I didn't see it coming, how I could have missed the clues so blatantly. I wasn't just hurt, I was furious. Not just because she cheated, but because she lied, manipulated, played me for a fool. I kept thinking about all those nights I was just trying to be a good husband, and she was out there sneaking around with some guy who probably did give a damn about her. And this was the woman I married, the one I loved. It was like I was living in someone else's nightmare. I didn't sleep that night. I just stared at those photos, feeling this mix of shame, anger, and heartbreak. I knew I had to confront her, no matter how much it hurt. I couldn't keep pretending she was innocent. The truth was staring right at me, and I could no longer deny what I saw. I didn't even know how to bring it up. How do you ask your wife if she's been cheating on you with some celebrity client she was just friends with? How do you process the fact that the woman you trusted the most betrayed you so deeply? And that's when I realized this was just the beginning. The next day was a blur. I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck, my mind racing with everything I'd seen. I kept replaying those photos, trying to find some kind of rational explanation, but there was none. I couldn't focus on work, couldn't eat, and I definitely couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, her smirk, her smug little smile in those photos. It was like a punch in the stomach every time. I knew I had to confront her, but the thought of doing it made my stomach churn. I wasn't the type to blow up easily, but this. It felt like my world was crashing down, and I was just standing there watching it happen. I waited until late that afternoon, knowing she'd be back from her supposed work trip. I planned my words carefully, trying to stay calm, though I felt like I was barely holding it together. When she stepped through the door, all I could do was stare. She looked tired, a little flustered, but still as bitchy as ever. She threw her bag down and shot me a look, like she knew I was about to confront her. "Hey babe, what's wrong?" she asked, voice dripping with false concern. I could see the smirk she was trying to hide, the way her eyes flicked away just a second too long. That was my first clue that she knew I was onto her. Before I even could speak, I pulled out my phone and put the photos on. The table, her face froze. For a moment she just stared, her eyes narrowing, then she scoffed. What's that supposed to be? You're overreacting as usual. Those photos probably got doctored or taken out of context. She crossed her arms and looked at me with that typical bitchy sneer. You're paranoid, babe, relax. I felt my stomach turn. I was trembling a little, but I forced myself to stay composed. No, Emily, that's you. That's Chris. I know what I saw. How long has this been going on? How many times? I managed to get out, voice shaking. She rolled her eyes and scoffed again. Oh, please, you're so insecure. That's just some stupid paparazzi stuff. Maybe I was with a friend. Maybe I went out for drinks. You're making a huge deal out of nothing. She was lying, stone cold lying in my face. I could tell she was trying to play it off, but the way her hands trembled slightly betrayed her. Don't lie to me, Emily, I said, voice low and firm. I saw the photos. You and that guy holding hands in a hotel lobby. How many times have you been with him? How long has this been going on? She clenched her jaw, then suddenly started yelling. You don't get to accuse me. I work hard, I do everything for this family, and this is how you treat me. Like I'm some cheating bitch. You don't know the half of what's going on, so shut your mouth. Her voice cracked on the last word, and I could see the desperation behind her eyes. It was like a switch flipped inside me. I felt rage and heartbreak fighting for control, and I just couldn't hold it back anymore. I snapped. All the pain, betrayal, and anger boiled over, and I yelled back at her. I told her that I knew she was lying, that I'd had enough of her bullshit. I said I'd been patient, I'd been trusting, but I wasn't going to pretend anymore. She stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. I was left standing there, trembling, feeling numb and furious at the same time. I kept staring at those photos, trying to process what I just heard. My mind was a tornado of confusion. How could she lie so easily? How could she betray me like this? And most of all, what now? Did I even want to stay, or was this the end of us? I spent the rest of the day locked in my room, going over everything. I knew I couldn't ignore this anymore. I needed a plan, something to make her pay for what she'd done. I'd trusted her. I'd given her everything. And now I was left with this mess, this betrayal I'd never expected. I realized then that I'd been naive, that love doesn't always protect you from the worst. But I refused to be a fool forever. Something had to change. I just didn't know if I was ready for what that change would mean. After hours of sitting there, staring at the wall and replaying everything, I finally decided I needed to figure out my next move. Sitting around feeling sorry for myself wasn't going to get me anywhere. I couldn't let her keep lying and spinning her bullshit. I wanted the truth, all of it. But I also knew I couldn't just confront her blindly, especially not without some leverage. I needed to know how deep this thing went, how long she'd been doing this, and who else might be involved. That night I started digging through her stuff. I knew her passwords. She wasn't exactly careful with her phone or email security, so I cracked her phone, just enough to see some recent messages. Nothing explicitly incriminating yet, but she'd definitely been talking to someone. I saw a string of texts that made my stomach tighten. She'd been texting Chris almost daily, with flirtatious little messages and photos. The kind of stuff that made it clear she was more than just friends, or at least wanted to be. I also found some receipts from that hotel where the photos were taken. She'd been there at least 3 times in the last month. I'm not some paranoid freak, but that's pretty damning. What hurt the most was realizing she'd been lying about everything, about her late nights, her business trips, even the so-called innocent dinners with friends. She'd been sneaking around, hiding her phone, deleting messages, and I had been oblivious. I couldn't sleep that night, so I stayed up, planning how to approach her again. I knew I couldn't confront her with anger. I had to be strategic. The next morning, I decided I'd get her to admit something, even if I had to push a little. I needed her to crack, to own up. But I also knew I couldn't go in swinging. That would only push her further away or make her double down. I had to play it cool, act like I was still trusting, but get her to slip up. She came home that afternoon, acting like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't been caught red-handed. She strutted around the house, throwing attitude, pretending she was the victim. I kept quiet, letting her talk, letting her think she was winning. Then I casually brought up the photos. "Emily, I saw those pictures," I said, watching her face for a reaction. She paused, then scoffed again. "Oh, those? That's just some stupid photographer trying to stir trouble. It's nothing. You're blowing it out of proportion, as usual." She looked at me with that bitchy grin, like she was the queen of the world. I could see her trying to gaslight me, trying to make me doubt what I saw. But I wasn't buying it. "So you're saying that's not you in those photos, that you're not with Chris, that you haven't been hiding this from me?" I pressed, voice steady. She flip-flopped for a second, then snapped. "Fine. Yeah, all right, maybe I saw him once or twice, whatever. It doesn't mean anything. I don't owe you an explanation, especially not when you're accusing me of cheating all the time." Her words stung. I knew she was lying, but hearing her say it so openly made my blood boil. I told her I knew she was lying, that I had proof, and that I wasn't going to keep pretending everything was fine. She looked furious now, her bitchy mask slipping just enough to reveal her anger and frustration. She told me I was overreacting, that I was insecure, that I was making everything up in my head. But I knew better. I knew she'd been lying from the start, cheating on me with her celebrity client, or whoever the hell he was. That confrontation set something off inside me. I realized I couldn't just walk away and pretend everything was normal. I had to decide whether I was going to forgive her, work things out, or finally cut her loose. The pain was overwhelming, but at the same time I felt a strange sense of clarity. I was done being the naive husband. She played her hand, and now I had to decide how I was going to deal with her betrayal. And that's when I started planning my revenge. Not in some destructive way, but carefully, coldly, making her realize she couldn't run from what she'd done. I wasn't just going to let her get away with it. I'd make sure she learned what real consequences looked like. Because if she thought she could cheat, lie, and manipulate her way out of this, she was dead wrong. After that explosive confrontation, I knew I couldn't just let her go on like nothing had happened. I had to do something, but I also didn't want to tip my hand too early. Revenge, I realized, wasn't about smashing everything or making her suffer in the moment. It was about making her realize she lost control, that her lies had consequences. I started planning my move carefully, collecting evidence, setting traps, and making sure I understood exactly how deep this betrayal went. I spent the next few days watching her, keeping a close eye on her routines. I wanted to see if she'd slip up again, if she'd do something that I could use against her. She was, of course, still acting bitchy and entitled, throwing tantrums when I pressed her about her whereabouts. But I noticed something interesting. She was more paranoid than usual, checking her phone constantly, hiding it when I entered the room. She was trying to cover her tracks, but it was obvious she was nervous. That gave me a small edge. One night, I managed to sneak into her email account using her own phone. I've been planning to do this for a while, and honestly, it was the only way I'd get real proof of what she'd been doing. I found messages from Chris, more flirtatious texts, plans for secret meetups, and even some explicit photos she'd sent him. The worst part, she'd been talking about me, how much she hated my boring security job, and how she was so done with my stupid insecurities. That was the real knife. She'd been trashing me behind my back, making me out to be some paranoid fool. Reading those messages was hard. It felt like I'd been punched again. I'd trusted her, loved her, and she'd been completely dishonest. But at the same time, a part of me felt a strange sense of clarity. I knew I had to do something, but I wanted it to be calculated. I didn't want her to see me coming. I wanted her to feel the full weight of her betrayal, to realize she'd lost control of the game. So I started drafting a plan. I arranged for some fake evidence to be sent to her phone, screenshots of other flirtatious messages, some fabricated photos that looked legit enough to shake her. I knew she'd freak out when she saw it, and that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted her to feel vulnerable, exposed, and scared. It was about making her realize she couldn't keep lying and sneaking around without consequences. Meanwhile, I kept my cool around her. I didn't show how much I knew, didn't let her see that I was one step ahead. I played the part of the betrayed husband, quietly gathering my strength. Every time she snapped at me, I bit my tongue. Every time she lied, I just nodded and stored it away. I was playing her game now. I didn't want her to suspect what I was really up to. One evening, I finally dropped the fake evidence in her lap. I told her I had hacked her email, found everything I needed, and that I knew she'd been cheating on me with Chris. Her face went white. She stammered, denied everything, but I just showed her the fabricated messages and photos. Her reaction was priceless: shock, anger, desperation. She tried to deny it, to spin some other story about how I was just paranoid, that I was misreading everything. But I knew better. That was when I realized I'd broken the dam. She had nothing left to hide. Her bitchy mask was cracking, and I could see her unraveling. I felt a rush of satisfaction mixed with disgust. She thought she was untouchable, that she could cheat and lie without consequences. But now, she knew I wasn't going to let her get away with it. This was just the beginning of her downfall. I was going to make sure she paid for what she did, sooner or later. I didn't care if it broke us, but I was done being the fool she thought I was. The fallout from that night was intense. Emily was furious, crying, yelling, trying to spin her way out of it. She spat excuses, claiming it was all some misunderstanding, that Chris was just a stupid fling, and that she'd never meant for it to get this far. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I could see right through her lies. I'd caught her in her own web of deception, and there was no way I was going to be duped again. I told her she could stay or go, but I wasn't interested in pretending everything was fine anymore. She kept insisting she was innocent, that I was just jealous or paranoid, but I didn't argue. I knew what I had seen, what I'd read. I told her I was done listening to her lies. I wanted her out of my house, out of my life, and I wanted her to understand that she'd lost everything. That moment, I felt that icy calm come over me, like I'd finally taken back control. She screamed, called me crazy, accused me of being insecure and jealous. She said I was ruining everything, that she'd never cheat, and this was all some conspiracy I made up in my head. It was the same tired script: denial, blame shifting, trying to make me the bad guy. But this time I didn't bite. I just looked at her coldly and told her she had no one to blame but herself. She chose to cheat, to lie, to manipulate. She broke the trust, and now she had to live with the consequences. I gave her a week to pack her things. During that time, she kept pushing, trying to guilt me, crying crocodile tears, telling me she loved me, begging me to forgive her. But inside, I was already done. I didn't want her love. I wanted her to understand what she lost. I wanted her to see that her actions had destroyed everything we built. The woman I married was gone. The woman I saw in front of me now was just a con artist, someone I didn't recognize anymore. In that week, I started to detach emotionally. I focused on my own healing, on rebuilding my sense of self. I realized I'd been naive for so long, trusting her blindly. I'd let her manipulate me, dismiss my feelings, and now I was paying the price. But part of me also felt a strange sense of liberation. I was finally waking up. When she finally left, I felt a strange mixture of relief and pain. Relief because I no longer had to pretend I didn't know what she was doing, and pain because I had loved her, or at least I thought I did. But I knew this wasn't just about her cheating. It was about betrayal on a level I'd never imagined. I'd trusted her with everything, and she tore it all apart for some stupid affair. I'd been so blind, so trusting, and now I was left with the wreckage of what used to be. In the aftermath, I started reflecting deeply. I realized I'd learned some tough lessons about trust, about not ignoring the signs, and about standing up for myself. I'd always been the guy who believed in fixing things, but this time, I knew I had to walk away. Some betrayals aren't just about infidelity, they're about respect, boundaries, and self-worth. I promised myself I wouldn't let anyone treat me like that again. I still feel the sting, yeah, but I also feel a strange sense of clarity now. I know I'll move on, I'll heal. And eventually, I'll find someone who values me. Emily's betrayal was a betrayal of everything, but it also taught me that sometimes, the only way to win is to walk away and rebuild from the ground up. That's what I intend to do. In the days that followed her leaving, I felt like I was walking through a fog. The house was eerily quiet without her bitchy comments or her dramatic entrances. For a while, I kept expecting her to come back, to beg or to spin some new lie, but deep down, I knew that was over. The betrayal ran too deep, and my trust was shattered beyond repair. Still, I couldn't deny that I was better off without her constant lies and manipulations. It was like finally waking up from a nightmare I'd been trapped in for years. I threw myself into rebuilding my life. I got rid of her stuff, cleared out the remnants of the woman I once thought I knew. I started focusing on my career again, which had taken a hit during all the chaos. Working as a security guy for some celebrity, I'd always been proud of my job, but after everything, I saw it differently. It was a reminder that even in the most dangerous, seemingly straightforward jobs, the betrayals that hurt the most happen in the ones closest to you. Some nights, I'd lie in bed and think about everything, how naive I'd been, how much I'd trusted her, and how I'd let her manipulate me for so long. But I also knew I was stronger now. I finally understood that I owed myself respect, and I refused to let anyone make me feel small or unworthy again. That realization was freeing even if it came through pain. I learned that sometimes walking away is the bravest thing you can do. Over time, I started to pick up the pieces. I cut ties with some mutual friends, people who hadn't believed me, who dismissed my concerns, and I focused on my own healing. I started going out more, reconnecting with friends, rediscovering hobbies I'd set aside. Slowly but surely, I was rebuilding my confidence. I didn't want to carry the anger or sadness forever, but I also didn't want to forget what I'd been through. It was a hard lesson, but one I knew I'd carry with me forever. Looking back now, I see everything differently. I see the signs I missed, the red flags I ignored, and the times I should have spoken up sooner. But I also see that I'm better off without her. I learned that trust has to be earned, that lies eventually catch up to you, and that no matter how much you love someone, betrayal is a poison that can't be undone. Most importantly, I learned to value myself more, to demand honesty and respect, to never let anyone make me feel small just because they're afraid of facing their own bullshit. I won't lie, it still hurts. The betrayal, the loss, it's a scar I'll carry. But I also know I've come out stronger. And if there's one thing I can tell anyone reading this, don't ignore the signs. Don't stay silent when something feels off. Because sometimes the biggest betrayal comes from the person you trusted the most, and it's on you to stand up and walk away before you lose yourself entirely.